The story of DK Metcalf really is a crazy one. We all know him for his historic performance at the NFL Combine, running an amazing 4.33 40-yard dash, 27 bench press reps, then the awful 7.38 three-cone drill. In case you aren't familiar, the three-cone drill measures a player's quickness in changing direction. So when Metcalf ran this awful three-cone drill, the overwhelming assumption became Metcalf is a big, uncoordinated receiver who can't run anything but a go route. After most NFL draft projections said he would be a top 15 pick and one of the first 3 receivers to go, Metcalf fell all the way to the end of the second round and was the 9th receiver selected. He had been demoted to a deep threat who could just win with his strength at the line of scrimmage, then speed downfield before he even played a snap. But I think that his 2019 season showed that he could be much more than just a deep threat. Metcalf has become a victim of narratives. After a lack of consistent production in college and a disappointing combine performance, analysts everywhere decided that he was already a bust before he stepped onto the field. The vast majority of experts said this guy was the next Kevin White. They said he wasn't explosive enough to run routes and relied too heavily on his hands to create separation against press coverage. A lot of these analysts didn't want to admit they were wrong when Metcalf had over 900 yards this season, so they developed new narratives by saying that he can't catch or that he fumbles too often, and I won't lie, I fell for these narratives just like millions of other fans. It got to the point where it seemed like people were rooting for Metcalf to fail just because the analysts said that he was going to be a bust before the draft. But the truth is, there's little to no support for the idea that Metcalf's a bad route runner or he can't catch. So in this video, I'm going to try to give DK the credit he deserves for a really productive rookie season. The first narrative that developed about him was that he couldn't run an NFL route tree, which means that he could only run the simple routes like a go or a crosser. But as we saw last season, this is far from the truth. Because Metcalf is so fast, defensive backs will often play off coverage so that he can't beat them over the top with a go route, but he has a few different strategies he'll use to exploit that off coverage. One way he'll counter the off coverage is with a double move. This is a play from the Week 7 game between the Ravens and the Seahawks, and Metcalf is lined up at the bottom of the screen as the strong side or Z receiver. The cushion, or space between him and the defensive back, is about 8 yards, which is relatively big. The cornerback, Anthony Averett, is selling out to stop anything vertical. He's not worried about Metcalf catching a pass close to the line of scrimmage because it's 3rd and 11, so he's just trying to make sure he doesn't get beat over the top. And the best way to attack off coverage vertically is with a stop and go or double move. The function of these routes is to make the cornerback stop dropping deep and close the gap between himself and the receiver. Metcalf runs a double move by faking to the inside and accelerating out. He sells that fake with a jab step to the inside, then when he explodes outside he draws an illegal contact penalty and still creates enough separation to make the catch 37 yards downfield. A double move is not a simple route to run, and only works if you can really sell the fake by jab stepping inside and exploding outside, so not a route just anybody can run effectively. But Metcalf ran a great one here, and this is not the only example. Here's another play from the Week 14 game between the Seahawks and the Rams. This time Metcalf is lined up as the weak side or X receiver at the top of the screen against former All-Pro cornerback Jalen Ramsey. And just like the last play, the defensive back is giving himself tons of cushion because it's 3rd and 22. Metcalf runs a stop and go route, which is a fake curl turned into a go. When he gets to about the opposite 48-yard line, he's going to stop and turn around like he's running a curl, but as soon as Ramsey bites, he turns upfield and uses his speed to create that vertical separation. He creates just enough separation vertically to make the catch in traffic and convert the 3rd and long. This is another route that's really difficult to run effectively, but Metcalf ran it to perfection here. On perhaps the best play of Metcalf's rookie season, he ran a similar route. This was the play that sealed the wildcard game against the Eagles and sent the Seahawks to the divisional round of the playoffs. It's 3rd and 10, the Seahawks are backed up inside their own 15-yard line, and a first down ends the game, so they turn to Metcalf, who's running another stop and go. This time he doesn't fully stop, but he hesitates, which makes the corner close the gap, then he explodes vertically, creating about 3 yards of separation between him and the defensive back. He does a nice job adjusting to the ball in the air and makes the game-sealing catch. The theory about Metcalf only being able to run go routes has been proven wrong, but what about the idea that he couldn't create separation against press coverage without relying on his hands? Well, it turns out he can do that too. This is a play from the Week 6 game between the Browns and the Seahawks, and it's a good example of what I mean by winning at the line of scrimmage against press coverage. Here, Metcalf is lined up as the X receiver at the top of the screen and facing press coverage with heavy inside leverage. It's 3rd and 2, so the corner TJ Carey is doing the opposite of what the corners on the previous plays were doing. He's right on the line of scrimmage, daring Metcalf to run a vertical route with an outside release, but Metcalf instead runs a slant with an inside release and creates separation without using his hands at all. He stutter steps at the line, then explodes inside and uses his big frame to prevent Carey from making a play on the ball. Not only did Metcalf win at the line of scrimmage, but he did so with an inside release against inside leverage without using his hands at all, and he did this again in the following week against the Ravens. He's again lined up as the X receiver against Ravens quarterback Brandon Carr, who's leveraged outside just like TJ Carey was on the last play. Metcalf beats the inside leverage on an inside release with pure footwork and explosiveness. On both of the plays I just showed, Metcalf was running in-breaking routes, but he wasn't just winning against press to the inside, he could do it to the outside too. Here's a play from week 1 where Metcalf is lined up at the bottom of the screen as the X receiver against Bengals corner William Jackson, who's leveraged outside. Metcalf wins to the outside, then tracks the ball in the air and makes a great catch over his shoulder while using his body to prevent Jackson from getting in between him and the ball. Now that Metcalf has proven that the idea that he couldn't create separation at the line of scrimmage without relying on his hands is wrong, people have shifted to the idea that he can't catch, but this just isn't true either. Yes, Metcalf had a really bad drop in the end zone against the Eagles in Week 12 and a few others here and there, but even the best receivers drop passes. In 2015, Julio Jones dropped 17 passes. In 2016, Demaryius Thomas dropped 14, and in 2019, Julian Edelman dropped 11. DK Metcalf dropped 7 passes last year, and that wasn't just a result of fewer targets. He had a drop percentage of 9.5%, which wasn't even in the top 10 among receivers with 55 or more targets. Some guys with a higher drop percentage include Randall Cobb, Deebo Samuel, and Juju Smith-Schuster. DK Metcalf has pretty impressive hands in my opinion. I was surprised by how many times I saw him reel in a ball in double or triple coverage on tape. And the final knock on Metcalf is the fumbling problem. He did fumble 3 times in 2019, which was tied for second most among receivers, and he lost all 3 of those fumbles. But I think this is a fixable problem and not one that should be too worrisome. The first fumble came in Week 7 against the Ravens, and it was a bit tough to watch. Metcalf just dropped the ball mid-play, plain and simple. This seems like an isolated mistake to me, not something that's going to happen again, and just more of a freak accident. And the next one came in Week 10 against the 49ers. Metcalf became too focused on getting into the end zone that he let the ball get ripped right out of his hands, which is definitely not a good thing, but again, it's a fixable problem. And the last one was in Week 13 against the Vikings. It was originally ruled an incomplete pass, but the call on the field was reversed and it was ruled a fumble. DK was adjusting to a throw that was behind him and turning upfield while getting hit. And it was a call that could have gone either way, so yes, Metcalf did have ball security issues in 2019, but nothing that can't be fixed. It isn't like Metcalf is the only receiver in the league who fumbles either. Last year, Stefon Diggs and Julian Edelman both fumbled more than Metcalf, but I don't think people hold that against either of those guys the way they do with Metcalf. He's become known as a guy who fumbles just because people remember those plays I just showed. If the Seahawks had recovered the ball on that play where he dropped the ball against the Ravens, or if that play from the Vikings game was overturned, I don't think we'd even consider Metcalf to be a guy who has a fumbling problem. The fact of the matter is, these narratives are just that, narratives, and the analysts from Pro Football Focus and ESPN or wherever else will continue to drill them into fans despite the film and stats saying otherwise. Frankly, there's no evidence to support the idea that DK can't run routes, can't win at the line of scrimmage, or constantly drops passes. The truth is, this guy is a physical specimen with Hall of Fame potential. Now that I've gone through these ridiculous narratives, I want to briefly talk about my favorite thing about Metcalf as a receiver, which is the threat he brings in the red zone. Because he's so good at winning against press coverage at the line of scrimmage and has the athleticism to win with pure explosiveness, Metcalf has become one of the most dangerous red zone threats in the entire league. Here's a play from the Seahawks Week 2 game against the Steelers, and I did a video about 2 weeks ago about how awful the Steelers were at disguising their man coverage in the beginning of the season, so if you want a bit of backstory, go watch that. But anyway, because the man disguise is so weak, Wilson knows that Metcalf has a one-on-one matchup at the top of the screen, and the safety can't help because he's cheating to the opposite side. So Wilson just lets Metcalf win at the line of scrimmage and throws it up to him in the end zone for a touchdown. And yes, I know this isn't actually within 20 yards of the end zone, but the idea is that Metcalf can be a mismatch on those back shoulder fades. Giving Metcalf one-on-one coverage in the red zone is not a good idea, and I saw a lot of teams pay for that on tape. Here's another one where he's lined up at the bottom of the screen. He He wins at the line, Russell Wilson gives him a nice ball, and he has no problem bringing it in for a touchdown. There really isn't much you can do against him in the red zone because he's so dangerous as a vertical threat. But that's all I've got to say about DK Metcalf. He has a crazy high upside if he can continue playing the way he did this season, and there's no reason to believe he won't. The stats in the film both say this guy is special, and as long as he stays healthy, he could definitely have a breakout season next year. ESPN currently ranks him as the 35th highest receiver in terms of 2020 fantasy football, and I'd be surprised if he doesn't outperform that projection and put up wide receiver 1 type numbers. I'm currently working on making these videos on different 2019 rookies, so if there's a specific guy you'd like to see, let me know. I've got about 20 guys written down on a list, and I saw some requests for Max Crosby, Brian Burns, Devin Bush, Deontay Johnson, and a few others, so those should be on the way at some point soon. But that's it for me for now. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.